Raceday, isn't it?
So, here's the thing. British cycling regulations don't allow you to put a camera or anything else on your bike when you're racing. So I can't get any footage of the race, which is a real bummer. So what we're going to do is, because I can't give you any footage of the race, I thought we'd run through the power file and so you can see how much I was hurting.
Here we are then, Cyclopark, Saturday 16th of April. You can probably see from the map there that we used a slightly shorter version of the Cyclopark course, turning right just after the start-finish straight. So this is the full race file. You can see I lasted 47 minutes out of the entire race. It's an average speed of 36.6 kilometers per hour, although a lot of that was on my own off the back. Now, I download my power file to Golden Cheetah. I know a lot of guys use Training Peaks, but I've got a wife, 2 kids and a mortgage, so I use Golden Cheetah because it's free. Takes a little bit more getting used to, but it's a pretty good program, and if you spend the time, there's an awful lot of information can be taken out of it. So the first thing I want to do is have a look at how much I was pedaling. It's an old saying that the guy that pedals the least is the guy that wins the race, so let's just have a look at how often I was not pedaling, and the answer is I was pedaling all the time. So that means I was working pretty hard throughout the entire race. So let's have a look at the ride file. Here we go, a mass of colours, but don't worry, we can just pull that apart a little and maybe just have a look at just the watts. Now this is a fairly typical power chart for a criterium race. You can see the massive spikes all over the place, and those are corners. So with any criterium racing, what happens, you go into a corner and you've got to sprint out of it. And you can see at the start of the race, pretty much every corner I'm up around 600 watts, which is pretty tiring and takes a lot out of your legs. You can see the that in speed. We're around the 45 to 50k mark for this first part, and then slightly slower whilst I was on my own, and then a little bit later on, when I was lapped by the bunch, pace picked up again. So when I come to look at my power output after the race, I'm generally trying to find out, why is it that I get dropped? Why is it that I didn't win the sprint? Why is it that I was left behind by my mates? So in this case, I didn't last that long. I only lasted about 5 laps with the bunch. So let's just look at that period when I was with the bunch and what was happening and why it was that I actually ended up getting dropped. You can see it was 13 minutes. It's an average power of 263 watts, an average speed of 39.3 kilometers per hour. And you think, well, 263 watts is pretty high. I should be able to maintain 39.3 kilometers per hour. So what's the issue? Well, there's lots of big spikes here. You can see them, and each one of those is an exit from a corner where I'm having to sprint out. And you can see them here. So that's a sprint there of 10 seconds at 655 watts, 665, 645, and so on. They're all in the high 600s there. So, you know, that's fairly uncomfortable. So why am I having to sprint so hard? And why is this average power so high? You know, did I accidentally enter myself into a first cat race? Were the guys supremely fit? No. What happened was I was poorly positioned. I'd slipped down the bunch after a small crash, and it was the accordion effect. You know, when you go into a corner, everyone bunches up, and then as they come out of the corner, everyone in front of you sprints, and you've got to wait to start sprinting, so you've got to sprint twice as hard to keep up with them. And that was happening, as you can see, about every 35 to 40 seconds as we went through each of the corners at the bottom of the course. So that was pretty tough, and I'm probably working twice as hard as the guys at the front. probably not that much fitter than me. They're probably not putting out 263 watts the first 15 minutes. They're just positioned better. Now, you'll speak to a lot of people and they'll say, well, move yourself up. They'll say, make sure you leave some gap between you and the guy in front as you go into the corner, so that you're not having to sprint, so that you can ease yourself onto the wheel. The problem, this is fourth cat racing. You leave a gap, someone comes up your inside at 10k an hour faster, fills it, and maybe takes half the bunch out. You're going through these corners at 5-6 abreast with guys that go around corners in stages. So it's not as simple, and moving up is not always as simple as well. And maybe I'm not the best at it, but it's not always easy as some would have you believe. So it's all about positioning. It's all about making sure you're in a position where you're coming out the corners doing 300 watts, not 650 watts. So once I've understood why I had such a bad ride, then I'm really just kind of interested to see what I got out of the ride. So if we look at the whole ride again, we can see it was 235 watts for the entire event. And I can also see how that sort of pans out in terms of my bests by looking at my critical power. Now, the other guys wouldn't want to show you this, but hey, I'm not proud. I know where my weaknesses are. So, you can see fairly high power outputs, but I was never involved in any sprints, so quite why I was doing 900 watts up here, I don't know. But, basically, I've beaten my 5-minute max power. I've beaten my 10-minute max power, and I'm pretty much at threshold for the entire event. So it was a pretty good workout. Again, that will also be reflected if I take a look at the heart rate distribution. I think I've said in videos before, my threshold is around about 175, 178. And you look at this, I'm spending a lot of time around threshold, if not above, working pretty hard, out in the wind on my own, or with a couple of guys that managed to pick up on, just trying to stay away from the bunch. Something else that you can look at within Golden Cheetah is quadrant analysis, which is basically about where you put out power in terms of in relation to your cadence. I'm told it's quite useful. It's not something I've really got my head around yet, so if anyone's got any pointers on that, please shout up and let me know. So that's just a brief look at this race on the back on the 16th and how I interpret my power data afterwards. Obviously, what I'm then looking to do is to see where those weaknesses were. In this case, I think it was more technique rather than fitness. But if it had been a case that I wasn't able to hit the watts I needed to over a certain duration, I could then go away and do specific interval sessions to work on that particular weakness, whether it was a deficiency in 30-second power, 1 minute, 5 minute, or threshold, whatever. It gives you an indication of where you need to improve and allow you to train specifically. So that's probably the most useful thing that having a power meter gives you.
So there we go. I'm hoping that wasn't too dry a subject for you. We'll get some more on-bike footage next week. Loads more from training around here and stuff with the guys, so hopefully that'll be a bit more exciting.